The Australian Open is set to begin 3 weeks from today, and yet dozens of players are not being allowed to leave their hotel rooms, not even to train. Look at these photographs, training in your room. 72 athletes are now in quarantine after possible exposure to the virus. 9 COVID-19 cases have been linked to 3 chartered flights that brought the tennis players and their teams and their colleagues and friends and family to Melbourne. Australia's used targeted lockdowns and high rates of testing and contact tracing to manage the pandemic in the country. Now, the Australian Open might well serve as a grim warning for other big international events that are scheduled to take place this year. For instance, the World Economic Forum, normally held in Davos about now, instead is going to be held in Singapore in late May, about a dozen weeks from now. The following month, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says a face-to-face G7 summit will go ahead as planned in Cornwall, in England this June. That's perhaps easier to deal with, there's not so many people. But the biggie, the Tokyo Olympics, cancelled last year because of the virus, rescheduled for later this summer in July. Joining me now, the medical analyst Dr. Leana Wen is with me now. You know, the Australian Open, they've had a good fist attempt to get the thing going, and they've ended up in some sort of, I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine on the day, but they all had to get there 3 weeks before, and they've all had to do this and that and the other. How realistic is it for other major events?
Richard, it's really hard right now, and that's because the virus level is just so high in different parts of the world, including in the US where I am, but also the UK and so many other parts. And we know that when we travel, when people travel, the virus travels too. And so I really hope that organizers of events will say, if there's something that can be done virtually, please do that. So maybe the World Economic Forum can be done virtually. Olympics will be a lot harder, but maybe you can do a combination of testing, strict quarantining, and by then maybe there'll also be widespread vaccination of the athletes, which would help a lot too.
The athletes, well, you know, there are thousands at the, there's only dozens of tennis players, but there are thousands at the Olympics. But it would make it, I mean, let's have a moment of realism, Leana. It's January. Even if vaccination continues at a fair old clip with J&J and AstraZeneca, realistically, most of us are not going to be vaccinated by the summer.
That's exactly right. And the other major question that we don't know yet is whether getting the vaccine means that you are not able to transmit the virus. Right now, we know that getting the Pfizer, the Moderna vaccine, that it reduces your chance of getting severely ill, which is fantastic, and also of getting ill in the first place. But you could still be a carrier and transmit the virus to others. And so if some athletes are able to be vaccinated, but others are not, or if athletes are vaccinated, but spectators are not, you're still going to have issues of virus transmission potentially. And so I think you could still have very strict protocols. For example, maybe you do quarantine 2 weeks ahead of leaving. You do a test at the time that you leave, then you quarantine for another 2 weeks, and then do a test after that. But I'm not sure how many athletes or spectators are willing to put up with all of those protocols.
On a different subject, just listening to your answer there, I just want to take you up on one point. This idea that, you know, you could still be a carrier, you could still pass it on, you just might not get very sick, even if you've been vaccinated. That doesn't bode well for society being able to get rid of social distancing, is if even after vaccination, you still could be a risk and a danger.
Although I would say 2 things. One is that if enough people are vaccinated, we essentially could turn COVID-19 into the common coronavirus that causes a common cold. And so if you just get this illness, if everybody ends up getting infected with this illness at some point, but it doesn't cause severe illness, if people don't end up in the hospital, that's not so bad. But that really depends on having the vast majority of the population be vaccinated. And then you also hope that at some point you could reach herd immunity through vaccination, which would also help a lot.
If you were a betting woman, and I'm not sure whether you are or not, but if you were, do you think the Olympics realistically can take place?
I think some form of the Olympics could happen, but probably without spectators or with very limited spectators.
Wow. Gosh, every time we go with this virus, there's another moment of reality when we realize just how it's impacting our daily lives. Doctor, it's very good to have you. Thank you. We'll talk more again. I much appreciate your time. Thank you.